The cosmos is within us. We are made of star stuff. We are a way for the universe to know itself. Carl Sagan.
Welcome to the Lessons from Nature podcast, modeling the secrets of the bees. Hosted by Mark Rubin.
If you hear my voice, you're alive. And if you're alive, you made decisions that involved making plans. All human beings plan using perception, attention, memory, and problem solving. Today on the Lessons from Nature podcast, we'll be discussing Secret 10 from Honey is Money. There's always a queen. It's about the benefits of having a leader in an organization who can perceive the environment, focus attention where it's needed, use memory to keep track of resources, and solve problems for everyone. I'd like to introduce my co-host, Olympic coach Ram Nair. Ram is a chartered professional coach, master learning facilitator, and he holds a diploma in high performance coaching. He's been head coach for the Canadian national badminton team, the Canadian national para badminton team, the Mumbai Rockets of the Premier Badminton League, and the Vancouver Lawn Tennis and Badminton Club. He is the author of 2 books, The Sport of Life and From Confusion to Clarity. Ram will co-host 4 episodes with me. We will discuss the psychological secrets of the bees through the lens of the human business of making money and the bee business of making honey. Welcome, Ram. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Today, we're talking about centralized plans that come from having a leader. And I'm going to read a summary of this chapter. A girl is introduced to Queen Claudine, who is the queen bee in a beehive. And she's the leader of the hive who devises multi-generational plans, emphasizing the cyclical exchange of energy and care between the queen and her future offspring. And her objective is to ensure the survival and continuation of their genetic lineage. This would be similar to ensuring the care and survival and continuation of a winning streak, for example, in sports. So we're going to talk about the leadership in the context of the bee business of making honey and the human business of making money. So I have 2 beehives in my backyard, and they are right next to each other. And one of them failed. And I opened the hive up yesterday to see what was going on inside, and it wasn't pretty. And what happened at some point is the queen in that hive died for some reason. And the queen is the leader of the hive, and the queen's job is to lay eggs, fertilized eggs at a certain rate to create enough workers so that in the future, 21 days in the future, they'll hatch and be foragers and gather the energy from the habitat. And so the population dwindled in this hive. They didn't have enough workers or players in your case, and they weren't able to compete in the habitat with the other bees that had enough workers. Bees can create a new queen, a new leader in the hive if they have enough honey or enough energy to buy enough time to make that happen. It takes, I believe it's 41 or 42 days for that to occur. For whatever reason, this hive didn't do that. And what I think happened, it's kind of rare, but it's possible for a female worker bee that's not a queen bee to lay eggs, and that's called a laying worker. And what'll happen is she'll just lay male eggs, which are basically clones. And this is sort of like a way for the hive to create more males that could then mate with a virgin queen from like another hive and potentially spread the DNA that way into the habitat. But I don't think that happened because the hive's just full of male bees. The queen is gone, and the hive is likely going to die. And because of the time of year it is, it's going into August, I can get a replacement queen. But given the amount of time left in the season, just like in sports, given the amount of time left in the season and the idea that all the flowers are now gone for the season, Ryan, like all the money is gone, all the games are gone in your case, all the games are in the past. Okay, would you replace a leader, going in to the season that is just about training? Like there's timing related to this. So as it relates to succession planning, a leader develops a comprehensive succession plan to ensure smooth transitions of leadership between one generation into the next. Now you, as the coach, you're the leader of this team and you stay. But there's also got to be leaders within the team, I'm imagining, that do different things. So the question is how does a coach ensure a pipeline of talented players and leadership to sustain the team's performance as people either retire or transition out of a team?
Firstly, let me make a blanket statement that leaders think long. That's number one. Leaders think long. Leaders think beyond their influence, their personal influence. They think beyond the influence of key athletes, of key people. And if you want to think about it differently, and you want to think about it from a business sense, a leader thinks beyond the time that they're going to be chair of the board. They're going to think beyond the best producing president or best producing VP or best producing CFO, whatever they have. They're going to have to think systematically. And that requires a length of thought. That is a skill that I think for all leaders needs to be cultivated. Can you think not to the point of your retirement, not to the point of the retirement of your best division heads or your best athletes, but beyond all of that? So what's it going to take? And what that's going to require is that if I want to have people in key positions, be that on my sports team or be that in my organization of business, I'm going to have to identify much further beyond the simple tasks that those people do. So let me emphasize that. So if I say, well, I've got a great doubles team. One of them has, and typically in sport, and especially in the sport of badminton, you have one person that's, generally very powerful. The other one may control the net play, may have more touch and more finesse. They both have both of those things, just that one is a little bit more adept at one than the other. And one of them is older, one of them is younger, and one of them is gonna, maybe retire. Okay. We know that that's going to happen. We know that time brings change. What is the key component? Is the key component now then for me to find another player that hits as hard as the player that's being replaced? Maybe is the answer, because the answer isn't, because anybody can find that set of skills and say, oh, I'm looking for this set of skills. No. It's beyond that. Can I get the same output? So I need to know a lot more than what this player is able to do. Just like I need to know a lot more than what my VP of sales is able to do. My VP of sales can sell really great. What else can they do? What are all it's by definition, that's their job, right? So I got to go find a great salesperson. Yeah, of course I'm going to go find a great salesperson, but it's beyond that. It's what are the other things that this person brings? Does he or she bring compassion? Do they bring motivation? Do they bring far thinking? Do they bring friendliness? Do they bring strictness? What is it that they bring that makes that team work? So whether it's my doubles team, in addition to the power, what are the other things that that person brought to get their partner motivated to continue to win? Or if it's in a business, what is it more than sales that this person brought to the table for the rest of the team to follow and emulate? In order for me to know that, I have to do some thinking, and I have to do some long-term thinking. To answer your question, to assure that I keep winning or that I keep performing in business, I need to understand not only the roles that need to be filled, because that's the simple part, but the deeper part is, what is the outcome of the roles? What got those roles to work? For example, in your example of the bee, the queen, you had a queen. The queen died, and they were supposed to replace the queen, but they didn't. Well, something was off, because somehow in that structure, the outcome, the goal of that hive to survive wasn't imprinted deeply enough, right? So it's way more than just doing the function. It's everything around the function.
I mean, that's exactly the best way to explain what happened in the hive, is through that lens. Is there was a worker who was laying eggs, but they weren't fertilized eggs, and so it didn't work.
Mark, and how many business people do we know? Because we both work in that field, and say we've got somebody that on paper just can produce, but then you put them in a setting where they should be able to produce, but they can't. And the reason they can't is nobody thought about the fact that they really they produced in a tech world, but then we put them in the junk business. That didn't work or whatever. And that's really simplistic. But if you want to make it more deeper, what were the personality traits that the person that was producing, and how did they motivate the rest of the sales force underneath them first? What were the skills?
It's a smart way to look at it. And I'm glad you're here. Next up, the idea of knowledge preservation. A leader implements strategies to preserve and pass on critical knowledge and expertise to future generations. And I imagine as people are coming and going off of your teams, you're not only thinking about their skills and personalities, but knowledge, things they've learned. So how do you ensure that your coaching methods and game strategies are either documented or transferred as a leader, into the future generation?
There's a great hockey coach named Scotty Bowman. And if anybody has ever heard of Scotty Bowman, they know that he was, I think, one of the most winningest coaches in the NHL. There's a story that's associated with him and was told to me by one of my colleagues, where he walked into a coaching conference and he had a bunch of binders. And he said, right here is my playbook. And I got a copy of it and I can give it to all of you, right? I can give it to you all. And what was fascinating with that is that everybody's like, oh, we got to get this play because, these are all the written down plays. And he further followed along. He said, but there's one thing with that. There is only one Scotty Bowman, and that's me. When I coach and when I'm mentoring coaches, for example, I just did that today. I said to the coach, I go, I will share with you my methodology. The plays are yours, though. The methodology, that's something different. I can give you my playbook. I can give you all the plays I know. But there's a little secret sauce behind it. And that informs me on how to create the actual drills and patterns and exercises that come in with it. Identify that. And then you have to find a leader that can, again, go back to what I said earlier, a leadership candidate that can also share with you that same vibration, that same level of understanding. Because again, if we want to talk about succession planning, how many business people do we know that have passed on their very lucrative multi-million or billion-dollar businesses to their offspring, and then the company's gone kaput, even though those children probably learned everything at the feet of their parents, but they weren't able to carry it off because they weren't their parents, because they didn't share that methodology. They didn't understand the methodology. They understood the mechanics, and the mechanics and the methodology are two very different things. So if you're going to pass on requisite knowledge that ensures success, study it and understand what the methodology behind that is. Then go forward.
It's a good question. It's the difference between passing on the sheet music with the notes, with the practice of creating like an orchestra, picking the players and rehearsing. Okay, it's the rehearsal. It's not the written notes on the sheet of paper. I mean, the written notes on the sheet of paper is the music, but creating the music is everything else that you just said. And that is a thing that can be learned through observation, but everybody's so different. It's timing, rehearsal.
And then there's inflection, right? Like Indian classical music has no written notes.
Oh, really?
It's passed down as an oral tradition. And then the student gets to inflect upon that methodology. So while the note cycle is identical, the inflection, the volume, the vibrato is all different. And when people play that and understand that, it becomes, again, a totally different piece. So they refer to it in Indian classical music. We have a saying, it's called freedom within discipline. So there's a discipline that surrounds it, but then there's a freedom inside of it. And if we think about the bees passing on knowledge, I mean, the queen bee didn't say, well, you lay your eggs here, 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 and here. It said lay eggs, right? Didn't tell you what pattern necessarily to follow or whatever. They just said, this is how this is done. So there's freedom, but there's also a discipline. If we look at business and we say, listen, our methodology to success, if somebody shares that, is that we want to ensure that our clients get serviced with whatever food that's being served on their plate with the highest quality, so that when they go home, they tell 10 people about it. Now, would it matter if that was the case, if I served pasta or if I served steak? It wouldn't.
No.
Because what the methodology was I want people to, when they finish this meal, I want them to say something positive about it and share it with 10 people. That is methodology in business. And methodology in sport is the understanding of, well, listen, when I teach, I start off with a static example, and then very, very slowly, I move it to a dynamic, and then to a game situational, and then to an open game channel. That's my methodology. I don't go from like, here's a shot, let's use it in a game. I go, here's a shot, here's some different ways to think about it. Here's some game situations it might get used in. Let's play a game using that shot.
I think it's a great teaching method. And I guess that's the same thing as like, here is a flute. Here is how you play it. Here is how you read music. Here is how you play music with other people. These are the things you watch out for. I mean, it's very similar.
It's
idea.
very similar.
Yeah. Cool. Let's talk about the idea of long-term strategic goals. So a leader sets ambitions, long-term goals and outcomes, and outlines the steps to achieve them over their generation, but also successive generations. How does a coach develop multi-year plans to improve team performance and achieve championship level success year over year, knowing you're competing against other people at your level doing the same thing on the other side? How does this work?
So multi-year plans are something that are so fascinating, because multi-year plans are only as good as the first 7 weeks. And you go, what? Yeah, well, 7 weeks is called a macro cycle. So I'll sit there and I'll go, okay, well, here are the first 7 weeks. But what we're doing is we're charting somebody's career to that of reaching the gold medal, a podium platform, right? So if you want to be in the podium, we say there's a great rule of thumb that they've used, and it's the 10,000 hour or 10-year rule. So 10,000 hours of practice or 10 years, you become an expert at something. So in this case, let's talk about that in the world of the Olympic cycle. That's 2.5 Olympic cycles, right? Because every 4 years, so 10 is, so 2.5. So we're going to coach young Mark, and we're not talking about the next Olympics. We're not even talking about the Olympics after that. We're actually talking about the Olympics after that we're going to, so now it's a long, long ways. And we're going to say, well, Mark, if that's where you want to reach, then the simplest way is, of course, again, this is a tactic more than anything else. I'm not sharing a theory, I'm sharing a practice, and everybody does this. Well, then in year 9, your rank should be this, year 8, year 7, year 6, and so on, right? So you have these targets set forward. Okay, so that's the simple scientific way. We can have those same things in business, where we have a goal that we want to go to, like as a friend of ours wrote in a book, that if you want to double your business, you just grow at 26% a year, right? And in year 3, you will have doubled it. If you do the math, then it works. But can you grow the business 26%? Having a ranking set forward for you, will you achieve that? And again, I'm going to go back to the theory. What's it going to take for you to want to achieve that? That is something innately that you will have to wake up for somebody in themselves, or they will have to have that hunger pre-built. So the hunger to get on the podium has got to outweigh the desire to take a day off, or to take vacation, or to take a rest, or to let that game slip away, or to let that client walk out the door, or to not do a follow-up call with the person that had a bad meal, or, and on and on and on and on and on. We have a local billionaire, he's about $15 billion, and he bought a giant food chain. He's 97, I think he is now, or 95. He's in his 90s now. Mark of the man is that people didn't like when he took over this food chain. So 500 people wrote in saying they were going to let go of their grocery store card. And he says himself, well, it took me a couple of months, but I called every one of them. He personally called the people that had turned in their cards. And it was like, what? Why did you do that? He goes, well, see, I got to find out why they're leaving.
Yeah, smart.
Why do you care? There's only 500 of them. You have thousands and thousands and thousands. Yeah, well, those people they have family, and they have friends, and those friends have friends, and those friends have family. So it's much easier for me to try to talk to 500 people than to have disappoint or turn away the 5 or 10,000 that those 500 may influence. Now that's a leader thinking long.
Yeah.
And we think it's short, right? We think it's short. He picked up the phone, he called 500 people. Well, why not just go get another 500 people? Because he's not thinking about those 500. He's thinking about all the 500 that they influence. So in terms of that entire question, how is it then that we will target that growth in the same way that we identify success and successful candidates and successful successors, is to look at the magic behind the numbers. Me simply saying that you need to improve your ranking by this much is just numbers. That's easy. Me having the ability to convey to you all of the things that need to go in, and you cultivating that hunger to achieve that, that is what ensures success.
Inspiration is the best tool in the toolbox for getting people to show up. And it was a good story to hear you say that.
There you go.
Let's talk about cultivating leadership qualities. And this is something as in my businesses, as the businesses have grown in the junk business, the org chart, there's a lot of workers putting junk in the trucks. But the ratio of workers to managers, like there's a low number of managers to workers because the work is highly simple and repetitive, which means that like the unit of work, like understanding like how work happens is simple. So it's easy to scale those structures. So one manager can handle a lot of employees in trucks. And what happens though, in this structure, which may seem like something that's good, at some point, when you need managers on top of your managers. So now you have like a playing field of managers, and maybe you have 100, and maybe you need 10 people to manage the managers either by region or by area or something. And thinking through what are the leadership qualities of a manager who manages a manager who manages a bunch of employees, like that next layer, that next level is something that requires a lot of thinking. And the reason it's particularly hard, or at least it was in my business, is that I was the one that was managing the managers who were managing the workers. Mm-hmm. And now I'm not, because I have a big team. And that transition out for me, because it took me, because I grew into it. Like I started with like 4 trucks, then 6 trucks, and 8 trucks. And I got a couple hundred trucks. I developed these skills over 2 decades of learning, like on the job learning of how I could manage a manager who was managing lots of people. And then I had to give that job to somebody else. And I hadn't thought of like, what did I learn in these last 2 decades that enabled that to occur? So switching over to, and actually let's bring it back to the bees a little bit. So in the bees, in the beehive, when a queen bee is losing her productivity, she will be replaced by the hive through a consensus voting process, where they'll vote to take her, to replace her. The worker bees will convert regular female worker eggs into queen eggs. And then the first one that hatches of those eggs will kill the other unhatched queens and then kill the queen bee and take over the hive. And at that point, the queen bee is weak and less likely to defend herself from this genetic upgrade of life. So basically, the genetic leadership is transferred through the hive this way, and the stronger queen takes over. And so that's related to business and sports. So how does a coach, groom like team captains and emerging leaders so that they can then inspire and motivate the younger generation, and maybe relate this to business too?
Again, these are examples that live among us, right? So leadership, firstly, my other comment on leadership is service. Leadership is service that combines knowledge and experience. So at one point, you're the rookie on the bench and you're not getting off the bench right now. But then one day you're off the bench and you're the young performer, and then you become the captain. and you become the cap because you're outstanding performance. And then you start leading at that point by example, and just by example. But you don't know what you're going to do beyond that. And then one day, maybe you get injured, or maybe somebody else takes your position and you're on the sidelines. And now you got yourself a question. And that question is, what do I do with the rest of my career? Well, if you want to give back and if you want to stay in that field, what you do is you look at the new young upstart and say, if you want to do this, this is my experience, I would try this. And that young person says, well, I don't know how to do that. That's okay. Listen, come on out here. I'll show you, because you still have enough jam to show them. And then you show them, and then you train them, and then you give them the requisite knowledge and the encouragement, right? Through your own experience. And then one day they become captain. And when they become captain, you just became coach. And that's how life goes. And it goes that way in business as well. And then one day as coach, by the way, there's another transition. One day as coach, when you've been there long enough, you discover that all of the things that you had to share, all of those experiences are becoming less and less relevant now. Okay. And you move to something else. You become the assistant GM, and so on and so on. You make room. The worst types of leaders are the ones that hang on to power, no matter how good they are, because at some point in time, there is a change required. And there is a repetition that starts taking place. And you have to be able to recognize that. So in business, if we think about it, the chairperson, the chair of the board, at some point needs to come off, become chair emeritus, and then maybe take on an advisory role after that. I believe that in teaching and coaching, we serve three roles. Instructors first, A to B, do this. The second one is facilitators. We'll facilitate. Well, if you want to do this, you could try this and this, or you might want to try this and this, because now what we're doing is we're helping that other person become a leader in that facilitation process. And the highest stage is where you're the mentor, you're the sage. You just sit back in your chair and you wait. You wait. If you're smart, you will wait for somebody to ask you the question rather than you inflecting, because they're past that stage, right? You're not going to instruct somebody that's already a facilitator. Now, you can only help them when they want to be helped. Otherwise, you're starting to destroy your own business. So whether you're the queen bee that's hung on too long and is waiting genetically to get killed and get weak, or whether you're the coach that's been in that position too long, either way, it'll turn out to be the same. Or you're in business and you are the CEO or the highest at your thing, and you're not leaving now, and the people circle because they don't want your knowledge anymore. Now there's, familiarity breeds contempt, right? So before that ever happens, get ahead of it and really learn the process and say, here are all the good things that you're going to ensure, by the way, that your knowledge and your experience is actually utilized if you are more giving, and if you are showing a path to your own departure in business or in coaching, or if you're like, imagine if the bee didn't have to die. Imagine if the bee could just fly away. I mean, it's different in the animal kingdom, I understand, but you as a human can. So you're in a chair and you're occupying it. It's time to get up and let somebody else have the chair. If you keep sitting in the chair, they're going to throw you out with the chair. If they throw you out with the chair, they lose all the knowledge that they had. If you get up and leave the chair there, at least they have the chair that's still there. The chair contains its own knowledge, and people will use it and say, what a great chair. Let's use this.
I think it's a really good parallel example. Let's do one more.
Yep.
That's related to this, which is about feedback loops, because I'm super curious about this with you, because I have no idea what you're going to say about this. So there are feedback loops in the hive. And I had mentioned earlier the idea that the queen is trying to keep up the egg production with the available energy. And there are bees called the attendants to the queen that follow her around and they measure her performance. And basically, they have the same sensing capabilities as a queen bee, but they don't lay eggs. And they're emitting a pheromone in the hive. And that pheromone says she's doing a great job. And they're voting with this pheromone. And imagine there's 10 of these attendants at the queens. 10 out of 10 say she's doing a great job. But then one of them, with her amazing perceptive abilities, says, she's just doing okay. And she lowers this amount of this pheromone that says she's doing a great job. And like the next couple of days, like another couple do. And then when it gets below a certain level, this pheromone that's in the beehive contained in a box gets below a threshold. And then that signals to the other worker bees who are not next to the queen, not observing this. It's a signaling mechanism, a feedback mechanism that says it's time to make a new queen. And that's when they start their magical process of converting regular eggs into queen eggs. And that's a built-in feedback. It's a performance monitoring system with voting that signals to other people, the other bees that aren't there physically, can't see, can't even sense what's happening, to take an action that will result, cross your fingers, in longer term survival of the genetic code. Because if they replace the queen fast enough, then there's enough energy in the hive to ride out that 41-day cycle so they can emerge on the other side and keep going. And so in sports, how does the coach create an environment where players feel comfortable providing feedback and input, leading to collective team improvement, even including on you as the coach?
We have an athlete-centered process. And the simple answer is you tell them that. You have discussions at times where it's going to be a discussion and not an argument, where it's going to be a sharing of ideas rather than a blame game. And you can only do that in, I'm going to tell you, in happy moments. In sad moments, that's probably not going to happen so well. So, you can either schedule that or have them unscheduled, and you have to be able to feel the feels. Like, what's your actual opinion? Have that space and understand the words critical reflection. It is a moment in time where you're able to reflect upon the words being said by you or to you. And you have to be open to receive the same type of criticism as you're providing. And that's okay, as long as you can remove the personality from it. So my best advice for any business owner is, don't look at yourself as Bob, the business owner, or Rachel, the business owner. No, instead look at yourself as a business owner. You're not associated with anything. So this entity, there's a great saying I like to say to people: the chair that I sit in today, someone else sat in yesterday, and somebody else will tomorrow. And what I refer to that is any positions of power, or any positions at all, if I want to really extrapolate, any positions at all that I might hold. Don't get too tied to the chair you're sitting in or the title that you hold. We're always changing. We're always evolving. And so whether you are that person that is able to or not able to deal with open conduct and open dialogue, think of yourself as not that person, because it's not the person that's being spoken to. It's the position that's being spoken to. If you're in business, that position. If you're in sports, that position, because somebody else was the coach before me and somebody else was the coach after me. The time that I occupied that role as coach, the players were different too. There were different players. Now there's different players, but the problems were also different. And then the way they spoke about it was also different. But the solution is always in dialogue. If you can do that, you're going to get somewhere. Leadership is transitory. It changes. The way you lead today may not be the way you led yesterday. That's okay. Leadership is necessary, right? It's necessary. If we all sit around and have equal opinions, we're not going too far. You're allowed to have an opinion, but somebody is going to have to make the tough decisions. And if you're that person, if you are the person that has to make those decisions, you may make decisions that that ultimately at some point they're probably not going to work out the best for you, right? If it's the queen bee saying, well, I'll just keep laying these eggs. I mean, the queen bee could decide not to lay so many eggs and extend her life. Maybe that's possible. I don't know. You know more about that, but the queen bee doesn't make us know, because it's not better for the hive.
That's right. You'll
make decisions better as a leader that are going to be better for the business. You're better for the team, even though those decisions may ultimately affect your role. That's okay. Leaders think long.
What a great ending. All collaborative species require leadership to organize work, develop skills, create strategies, and focus on learning. The fact that you're alive means that you use cognition to navigate the world. And since your plans and interactions interact with other people, Your decisions also impact everyone around you. I hope that your interactions are mutually beneficial for everyone. If you enjoyed this discussion about leadership and plans, please subscribe to this podcast, Lessons from Nature, Modeling the Secrets of the Bees. In the next episodes, we cover specialization and communication. Ram and I will see you there. Visit projecthoneylite.life for more information about living in harmony with the rest of nature.